Sean, Coach Rosie's with us here, and he says, we know eventually Tony went back to WCW. Did you ever consider, after your WWF days, making the jump to WCW? Is that even a thought that crossed your mind?
Well, I'm Tony's here, and nobody like Eric never called me. Tony, you called me one time. I don't know. Do you remember that? It was right when I was starting to leave, and you said, I don't even think anybody said anything to you, or Eric said to call, but you just kind of like said, "Hey, would you be interested?" or something.
Wow.
I don't know if you remember that, but that was the only time. The only time, like nobody, like Eric never called me or said, "Hey, would you be interested?" And Vince wouldn't believe me. Like he was totally convinced because the timing of it was around that same time, 93, and he didn't believe me. Like I went over to his office. I went with Kevin Dunn, and I wanted to have a meeting with Vince to tell him I was going to, when my contract was up, I was leaving. And he said, "Okay, so you're going down south, right?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And he's like, "Yeah, you are. I mean, it's not a big deal. I understand that, you got to go." And I said, "I'm not. I really." So, he just couldn't believe it. And I remember walking out of there, and he said, "Well, would you stay through whatever?" And he said, and seriously, if that's what you're going to do, just be honest with me. And I said, "Vince," I said, "if I'm going to work in the business, I'm going to work for you. I would stay." I said, "But I just feel like I have to go see what else I can do."
Yeah.
So, you guys, I don't know if you know my trail after that, but I went down, and like a year later, I was working at WWOR,
right,
and started anchoring there. And I'll never forget this, that after the first night that I was the anchor, the next day at my house, I got a telegram, and it was from Vince.
Wow.
Congratulating me and saying, thanks for making us look good. And I still have that to this day, because, and I just want, I don't think I don't know if he ever got it, but I called and I said, just tell him I wasn't kidding him. I had other plans.
Wow.
So
I think if I would have called you, in my mind, I would have called you asking, "Can you bring me back?"
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I would have done. So I don't remember that, but it probably was a thing to where we were looking for someone, and I don't know. I don't know. It was so many years ago.
Yeah, well, also I think we, I you probably don't remember, but we did talk a couple of times after you left, because we did, we did spend some time together, and I didn't really know, I knew I wanted to go, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so it was, that was a crazy time there. So that, I'm the same way. I wish I would have stayed. I really do, but you go down a different path, and I was just married then, and it was, wild times, but I think it was a great time. It really was.
I know we want to start this the tape here, but I think it's a great tribute to you that you were able to make the jump from pro wrestling to the news on a New York station, because you know how it was back then, because pro wrestling announcers became stereotyped, right? Or became boxed in. You were either a pro wrestling announcer, and then you really weren't thought of on a quote unquote legitimate level. So that was a hell of a step for you. And it shows your talent that you were able to get that done. Was there anybody in the newsroom that looked at you and thought, "Yeah, he's just a wrestling guy"?
Oh God, yes. I mean, you remember Phil Mushnick? I mean, it was in New York. Mushnick would write whenever Russ Salzberg would do a story, because he liked to do stuff about the WWE, and once in a while, every time he would do something, I'd have nothing to do with it, and Mushnick the next day would say, "Obviously, Mooney has influence with the sports department." Yeah, and I would do these serious stories. They would. That's like when I started there. I was on a week-to-week contract with WWR. That's how
Wow.
I was scraping for work, and every time, so they called them enterprise stories, and they would go out and I would go out and do these stories, and I would the first few because I never gotten the chance to write. I had always been a writer. I was a producer when I started, so doing these stories was really important to me. And WWR would promote these pieces, when you do them. And Mushnick would frickin' just kill me. And every time he would mention me, it would always be former wrestling announcer or former WWF announcer. So yeah, that would I put up with that a lot in the newsroom. And in New York, WWR was this giant TV complex. They used to shoot that show. Matt Lauer hosted it for a while.
Oh yeah,
in the same building. And I remember they used to have they had this giant newsroom. Everybody was, they even had the set was in the newsroom there at first. And everybody had, the desks, but they didn't have the cubicle walls. It was just desks. And I remember one time I'm in the newsroom and I hear this, "Where's Mooney?" And I'm like, what the hell? And it was Lou Albano had come in to do the show, because it was like, the crazy shows that they were doing back then. And he's got his entourage with him. He's all gimmicked up because he just did this show with the rubber bands and everything. And he's screaming across the newsroom, "Where's Mooney?" And he comes in and there he is. And he, flies across the room. And I'm like, oh shit, in front of all these seasoned journalists,
Yes.
comes over, gives me a big bear hug, and I'm just going, man, well, if I had earned an ounce of credibility at this point with these schmucks, but
it was gone.
Yeah. But you know what? The thing that was, though, all the way along, and this is what hurt me, like when Bobby wrote that book and said something like, Mooney denies. And it's like, I never, ever, ever denied. I was so proud of the work I was doing and the fact that I was able to make that transition.
Yeah.
And I wanted to tell them, like, that was the people I work for. They were the ones that would publish crap like that he, that I never mentioned that I was a wrestling announcer. But anybody ever asked me, interview me, talk to me, and they're all getting people trying to get you to trash Vince. I'm like, no, I owe that guy. I owe him. Yeah. He gave me a career. So that and it's never changed with me as far as I've never, thought I became this journalist. I've always been like the anti kind of like, you guys are full of shit. I used to say, you guys sit there and think that, that wrestling is fake. And I said, no. And, wrestling, it knows what it is. This is, it was fake news then, and it's never changed. So, yeah. And that's never left me. And the business, everything is wrestling.
Yes.
Everything in life is wrestling. And especially now, right?
Yeah. Right.
You want to know anything about life? Why was Pat Patterson and people like that? Like what made them such great wrestlers and bookers and all this? Because their greatest gift was psychology. Yes. They understood how people thought, and the greatest do. Right. And that's what it's all about. That everything in wrestling is life.